Hello all, and welcome back adventurers. It's good to see you again. Today on the Let's Learn series, we'll be covering defense and damage, which will cover this corner of the character sheet. If you're new around here and don't know anything about DC20, why not check out the Let's Learn DC20 playlist right here? And without further ado,
it's Morbin time.
Every creature in DC20 has two types of defense. Physical defense and mental defense. When a creature makes an attack or a spell check to deal damage, that roll must meet or beat their target's physical or mental defense depending on the damage type. So a higher defense means you're harder to hit. Let's take a look at physical defense. Physical defense is about blocking and avoiding physical and energy-based attacks that would threaten your body. In DC20, there are 14 types of damage, and here are the 9 that target physical defense. We have acid, things that chemically burn and dissolve. Bludgeoning, things that bludgeon with blunt force. Cold, things that freeze you, like ice at extreme colds. Fire, things that burn and ignite you, like fire and intense heat. Lightning, things that shock you, like lightning and electricity. Piercing, things that pierce, like arrows and stabbing weapons. Poisons, things that poison, like toxins and, well, poisons. Slashing, things that slash, like swords and claws. And force, things that cause damage with magic in its rawest form of pure energy. Most of the damage types are self-explanatory. Working out what your physical defense is actually pretty simple. It's a combination of your base defense, which is almost always 8, plus your combat mastery, plus your attribute score, plus any armor bonus. There are 3 types of armor, with slightly different formulas. Unarmored is 8, plus agility, plus combat mastery. You'll always add your combat mastery for unarmored defense. Next is light armor. This is 8, plus agility, plus combat mastery if you have mastery in light armor, and adding your armor bonus granted from your light armor on top. And finally, heavy armor. This is 8, plus might, plus combat mastery if you have mastery in heavy armor, and adding your armor bonus on top of that. Unarmored and light armor use agility, as they're more about being nimble and dodging hits. Heavy armor uses might, as it's more about taking and absorbing the hits with their armor. Heavy armor also tends to have damage reduction, often referred to as DR. It reduces the damage you take from attack checks and spell checks that target your physical defense, equal to a value of your damage reduction. Damage reduction can be bypassed if the attacker gets a heavy hit, which is when you roll 5 over your target's physical defense, or a brutal hit when you roll 10 over, or a critical hit. The idea is that these attacks were either so strong or so accurate that they manage to bypass the bulk of your armor.
Franz, could you try to break this glass, please?
Sure?
Yeah. Oh my Viking Art. Well, maybe that was a little too hard.
That brings us to mental defense. This type of defense represents the strength of your mind and soul at resisting supernatural sources of damage. There are 4 types of damage that target your mental defense. We have psychic, things that assault your mind like psychic and telepathic attacks. Sonic, things that attack your hearing, like sonic booms and loud sounds. Holy, things that singe and purify you with divine and holy power. Unholy, things that wither and decay with eldritch and dark powers. The mathematicians among you might have realized that this only adds up to 13 types of damage. Well, the 14th is true damage, which is a special type of damage that can't be reduced by any means and doesn't really target a defense. The formula to work out your mental defense is similar to physical defense. You use your base defense of 8, plus combat mastery, plus charisma, and intelligence.
Smooth transition.
In the last video, I talked about degrees of success. I wanted to dive a bit into how that works with attack rolls. Every 5 you beat your target's physical or mental defense by, you deal +1 damage. That might not sound like a lot, especially to those of you who are familiar with D&D, but in DC20, values for health and damage are scaled way down, so +1 damage is not insignificant. Here's a nice table from the current DC20 PDF, And if you're interested in getting a copy of DC20 yourself, I have a link in the description that will take you to the official website to purchase it. It's in Alpha 0.4 now, but it will update for free when the newer versions are released, so you won't need to worry about repurchasing the Alpha. Anyway, back to it. As you can see, if your attack roll is lower than your target's defense, then it's a miss and deals no damage. Meets it or beats it, it's a hit and deals your weapon's base damage. Then, if your roll is 5 or greater, that's a heavy hit. At this point, you ignore damage reduction, then deal your base damage +1. Beating the defense by another 5 will bring it up to a brutal hit, also ignoring damage reduction and dealing your base damage +2. This continues for every 5, but at this point it would still be considered a brutal hit, and it would still deal a +1 damage for every 5 you went over the defense. The rulebook suggests calling these beyond brutal. There are some features that may require you to make a heavy or brutal hit to trigger. On your character sheet, you'll see a handy little section that will help you work out your own heavy and brutal hit range. This just makes things very easy to quickly look at to see if you were hit with a normal, heavy, or brutal hit. For critical hits, they guarantee a hit and deal an additional +2 damage on top of any base weapon damage and bonus damage from heavy and brutal hits. I have gone into weapons and armor in a pre-alpha video I made a little while back. If you're curious, go check some things out. Just make sure to come back, okay? Looking into some other ways to modify the damage, we have immunities, resistances, and vulnerabilities. Like how damage reduction is a way to reduce the damage a creature takes, this is another. A creature with immunity to a certain type of damage, let's say fire, would take no damage from attacks of that damage type. You could also have immunity to certain types of conditions as well, like burning or bleeding conditions. Resistance would reduce the damage of a certain type by half, rounded up in case of half numbers. So if you took 9 damage from a type you're resistant to, that would half down to 4.5 damage, and then round back up to 5. In DC20, you always round up. Resistance X reduces the damage you take from a specific type by whatever the value of X is. Vulnerability actually increases the damage you take from certain types by 2 times. The example in the book says that werewolves are vulnerable to silvered weapons. There's Vulnerability X, which would increase the damage of a specific type by a flat amount. If you have any damage reduction, that's applied before any resistances or vulnerabilities. And lastly, for today, there's shared damage. There may be an instance where 2 creatures need to share damage. For example, if one creature falls from the sky and lands on another creature. In this case, the full damage would be split evenly between them, rounded up in case of half numbers. And there we go! That does it for today's lesson in DC20. Today we covered physical and mental defenses, damage types, damage reduction, heavy, brutal, and critical hits, and immunity, resistance, and vulnerability. Next time we'll cover health, death store, and combat resources, looking at these sections of the character sheet. Let me know in the comments, what type of damage would you like to be immune to in real life? And did you know that 99% of the world's population is subscribed? What are you waiting for? Headbutt that subscribe button now and join the rest of the world. And as always, consume more content. Consume. 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 Bye.